Right, thank you everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone present for this meeting in the Civic Centre and to those observing the meeting on Microsoft Teams. Fire alarm procedure, no fire drills are expected this evening, so in the event of an alarm sounding, please quickly make your way out of the building. There are 3 exits from this room which members can use to vacate the premises. Please switch mobile phones onto silent or switch them off and take any calls outside of the meeting room. Do not leave any possessions unaccompanied and or report any unaccompanied possessions. Remember to take any possessions with you when the meeting is concluded or as you leave the meeting. This meeting may be subject to filming or audio recording by others in accordance with the Council's filming protocol. Anyone who remains in the meeting following this announcement will have deemed to have consented to allow their image to be recorded and broadcast. Move on to the agenda proper. Item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
Apologies have been received from Councillor Moxon.
Any further apologies from the floor? No, thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Anyone got any declaration of interest? No one showing. Thank you. Item 3, minutes of the meeting. Depending on when the minutes were downloaded off the internet, there's a mistake in the minutes of the Planning Application Committee held on the 24th of November 2025. The resolution for item 5 should read that the application to erect 33 number affordable dwellings, associated access road, infiltration basin, pumping station and landscaping at the land to the south of Debdale Lane, adjacent to Hollyhock Drive and Emerald Close, be approved, subject to the conditions listed in the report and the planning obligation for the obligations outlined in the report, save that the affordable housing scheme is to provide 100% affordable housing with the tenure to be agreed, and in terms of agreeable to the Assistant Director of Planning, Planning Manager or Development Manager team leader with delegated authority to those posts to make or approve minor changes to the planning obligations and changes to the planning conditions. I'd like to seek a proposal and seconder for the amended minutes, please. Councillor Coxhead and Councillor Hansley. Those present, could I have a show of hands to approve the amended minutes? Any abstentions? Any against? That's carried. Thank you. We can now move on to agenda item 4, which is the planning application reference 2025-0602, change of use from residential dwelling use class C3 to a children's home for a maximum of 4 number children, use class C2, 16 Barnwell Close, Church, Warsaw. Could I invite the officer's report, please?
Chair, just by way of clarification, there are quite a few updates to the item just before I sort of launch into the main presentation. So I'll read them sort of just from the update sheet, so it'll be sort of a word-to-word update, really. So for clarification, there's been a late item received from the Highway Authority for clarification purposes to confirm that they are satisfied with the condition to limit the number of staff to 4 as opposed to 3, as additional parking has been provided, and to comment on emergency services access. They state, given the increase in parking, I would not anticipate or not expect a maximum of 4 staff to cause a material highway safety issue. If all car parking spaces are taken up, any overspill parking would be most likely to occur on the street frontage. It is unlikely that staff or visitor parking would occur on the shared private drive, if that was likely to obstruct access by emergency service vehicles or general residential access. The Highway Authority has also also commented on the substandard garage spaces and confirmed that these would accommodate a small car, and this would be for staff to manage. There's also been 6 late public objections, and these are on the following grounds. So there was concern about general disturbance in the area, parking, highway safety, and an increase in traffic, blockage of the private drive, and the inability for emergency vehicles to access other properties, an increase in antisocial behaviour and drug trafficking, impact on safety and well-being of residents. The amended plans do not alleviate public concerns. The garden is too small. It is not believed the committee report portrays the level of concern about the planning application. Questions whether the recommended conditions will be imposed or enforced. It does not meet the highway design guide, as that requires 6 parking spaces, and the garage spaces are impractical, which would lead to staff parking elsewhere. The amended red line includes land not owned by the applicant. The bin storage condition is impractical. There have been many instances where the bin lorries cannot access the bin store due to parked cars. The need to keep the bin store free of impacts on car parking. The applicant has been advised that 3 children would be more appropriate. NCC comments are inaccurate and questions whether the conditions will be imposed or enforced. Police comments have been left to the care home to manage, which is concerning. Determining the application at Christmas time stops people from attending the meeting. And just to offer some general comments on those. So most matters are covered in the main committee report itself. It is acknowledged that the car parking spaces for the garage are substandard. So they were built with the original dwelling and they form part of the parking provision for the house. And it is likely that although they aren't of the standard that the Highway Design Guide recommends, they would still be usable by small and medium-sized cars, so could form part of the parking provision for the house. And that's been confirmed by Highways. And it says, while the bin store does have some impact on car parking, NCC Highways do not formally object to the proposal with the 2 garage spaces and the spaces to the front of the garage. The proposed block plan has now been amended to demonstrate that the bins 6 spaces with the bin store. And then, however, based on the comments received, it is recommended that the wording of condition 8 is amended to require that the bin store is kept available at all times. And it's also recommended that the approved block plan should make reference to the fact that the parking is indicative, as the pattern of parking could change depending on vehicles, individual staff, and the size of individual vehicles. Could I just also note that condition 5, there's a typo in the condition where it makes reference to supported living. Because it's children that would be the service users. It wouldn't be a supported living facility. It would be a children's home. So that's mainly a point of clarification. Could we just move on to got a brief series of slides to go through? So the first slide, it's zoomed out a little bit, but it just shows the site context. So Barnell Close is a relatively new build residential cul-de-sac located in the south of Church Warsop. The host property is a 5 or 6 bedroom detached dwelling that's at the edge of the shared private drive that is off Barnell Close. Next slide, please. I'll just go back to can you try and, is it possible to zoom in on maybe on the block plan? So yeah, so the red line, so the red line shows the boundary of it's both the shared private drive and the property and the curtilage of the dwelling itself. It's located in the south of Church Warsop, and it's at the edge of the shared private drive off Barnell Close. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, if we could just zoom in on, possible to zoom slightly in. These plans were provided by the architects, but so they're not. So this plan just shows and it's an indicative delineation, as I referenced in the update sheet. So for context, so there's 2 integral garage spaces that were referenced on you'll see that there's actually site photos in a minute for more context, but there's 2 integral garage spaces that are about 2.1 meters in width each, which would accommodate small and medium-sized cars, typical car being about 1.8 meters in width, so there would be space for smaller cars. And then there's indicative green delineation showing these wouldn't be actually painted on the driveway, but it's drawn to show that it's possible to fit 4 cars on the frontage, and they're deliberately shown so there would be space between each car, so there would be space for door swing and people to get out and turn and so on. So 6 spaces up to a maximum of 6 spaces in principle. Next slide, please. So this just shows the proposed layout. So there's not too dissimilar to the existing layout in that there's 1 staff bedroom for a sort of sleepover during the staff rota there would be 4 members of staff during the day, 8 till 22:30, and then there would be 2 staff overnight, and that would be a 24-hour switch with changeover periods. And I think there's a condition to recommend, so any visitor parking they would have to register with an appointments log at any time. So it's not just a free for all, so they can't just show up at any time. That's controlled by condition. Next slide, please. So the next slides just show a series of photos. So as part of the development, the landscaped area would be converted into, so that would be extended. So further parking could be accommodated, while also noting the semicircle that's where sort of the edge just in front of the garden plant, that's where the bin stores would go on collection days, although that's the wording of that condition has been altered to make sure it's unobstructed at all times. Next slide, please. So that's just showing the existing sort of the relationship of other dwellings on the cul-de-sac and the existing integral garages. Might be worth just zooming, if we zoom back 2 slides, just to the one where you can see the whole driveway. So the previous slide. Maybe zooming on that one. So is that better? Yeah, so that landscape, so the semicircle on that's the current bin store location, so where you would place bins on collection day. We've recommended the condition to be altered so that won't be, so that has to remain unobstructed at all times. The landscaped area would be converted to hard standing, so to enable additional parking. Highways are content that it would be possible to get 4 cars on the frontage, which is a conservative estimate. Looking at the measurements, the drive is approximately 17 meters in width at full length, so it would be possible, depending on vehicle size, to get 5 cars on the frontage with 2 additional cars in the garages if needed, and depending on circumstance. We go to next series of slides are really just more of the same thing from different angles, so it's a fairly tightly arranged. So that's just the view looking down the private drive towards the end, so there's no free traffic. That's the rear garden. I think as a general principle, there's been no fundamental technical objections to the application. Some comments received, most notably there has been an advisory about the number of children being reduced to 3, but as a base officer assessment, there's nothing new about a children's home having 3 children. There's been a number passed by this committee that have accommodated 4 children with no restrictions on staff numbers. So in this case, we've got restrictions on both, and that's not unprecedented. So the officer assessment is that is on balance acceptable within the constraints of the dwelling. Comments received from the police are more of there was references to management plans in terms of addressing antisocial behaviour, but as has been discussed before, it's the main purpose of the planning application is to determine whether the use of the land or the dwelling would be acceptable in its own right. So Ofsted and the police obviously have their own, on terms of what types of children, child welfare, that's managed by Ofsted, and obviously the police would primarily responsible for direct antisocial behaviour concerns. Next, and this is just a general view of the road itself. So the main conclusion of highways is, were there any overspill parking, it would be most likely to be on the street itself, which in limited circumstances wasn't considered to be a highway safety issue. I think that's probably not much more, to be honest. I think that's the slides just show the pictures of the dwelling itself. So that's recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions and the amendments in the update. Thank you.
Thank you for your report. We've got two speakers on this item. So I'd like to firstly invite Francis McLaughlin to the lectern. You've got a little device there. If you press the middle, Francis. Yes, not before. You'll have 4 minutes once you start. You press your on off and it'll come on when you're ready.
I would wish to object to this application on a number of grounds. Parking. I've studied the recommendations and this application completely fails to meet the Highways Design Guide for C2, which requires 1 space per 3 bedrooms, 1 space per staff member, equating to 6 spaces. And there will be many extra cars parked. During the day there'll be 4 staff, plus others including social workers, healthcare professionals, family, cleaners, delivery workers, maintenance workers, etc. The applicant claims there are 6 spaces, but it is not feasible to use the garage, and that was deemed problematic by Highways. The garage doors are only 7 feet, which means it would be difficult for anything other than a very small car to use it. And also, there'd be cars parked in front of the garage, which would necessitate a lot of manoeuvring in a very narrow shared drive. This would be totally impractical and potentially dangerous. And so the latest thing we've been told, which wasn't what we were told before, is that the bin collection area should be free at all times. Well, I don't see how people are going to park in those areas, because if the bins are left out at night, they wouldn't be able to park with the bins in the way, because there are 5 bins and the bins would still be there in the morning. Some weeks there are 2 bin collection days, so that's 4 days when that area is in, the bins are going to impede the parking. So on those days, with the garage not being feasible to use, and there'd only be the 2 existing parking places available, thus not able to meet the Highways Design Guides. And also, that would mean this bin area not being used would mean there would be cars on the road on the days that I've just said. And the extra cars on the road cause a problem for the bin lorries. In fact, on one occasion I had to park my car on the road, and I received a letter from the refuse collection people saying I was causing an obstruction and that I shouldn't do it again. And recently a car was parked on the road near the proposed children's home, which blocked access for the bin lorry. The result was the lorry just drove off and the bins weren't emptied. Increased traffic. It's accepted that there will be considerable increase to traffic, and it's significant in terms of the property being on a shared drive to 5 properties, and the fact that this is currently a very quiet street, so the nature of the development will be changed. Parking on the road and increased traffic will affect the existing children's safety and well-being, because there will be blind spots, making it less safe for them to play outside, and for children and vulnerable adults to cross the road, thus resulting in loss of amenity. The extra traffic and parking also raises significant safety issues for a severely disabled lady in the corner bungalow of the shared drive. This lady is wheelchair bound and has a large vehicle to accommodate her wheelchair, which requires good clear space for access. She also has serious health issues, which mean ambulance access is needed 24/7.
30 seconds remaining.
We're concerned that this access could be compromised by significant parking and manoeuvring, particularly at changeover times. In the light of these serious concerns and the fact that this application clearly does not Thank you.
Francis, do you have any questions of the speaker? Material issues? Councillor Tempest Mitchell.
Thank you for your presentation and for coming. Have you had any consultation with the applicant over the last year or so, or since the application went in? Can you just describe the, let's say, community? Just describe it to me, would you please?
Anyone have any other questions on what the speaker had already said, not on the comment? We should restrict questions to what's been said. Yes, John.
Good evening, you all right? So, I have a little experience in knowledge of someone in a situation that maybe would access a place like what we're talking about tonight. And I think I'm correct in saying that any care associated people in way of nursing, doctor, dentist, social work, some of it gets done via the school day, and some of it gets done from practices like GP practices, hospitals, and things like that. So I'm not quite sort of in agreement that they would create a problem in way of the additional. And I think, am I correct in thinking that one of the biggest issues here is the concern of the amount of vehicle and the bins? Again, I only have a little experience. I'm not making out I'm some expert in this field, but I think mainly family contact is done away from the living environment. And so I don't think there'd be a concern with that. It's just my thoughts on what I've experienced.
No other questions have been indicated. No, thank you. Thank you, Francis. I'll invite our second speaker, Charles McLaughlin. Same thing applies, Charles. If you press the on-off button, your red light will come on. You've got 4 minutes when you start speaking. Thank you.
My objections to this application are as follows. Very recently, there have been items in the national news about a large number of adopted children being returned to council care due to the adoptive parents being unable to cope with the behaviour of the children. This is a tragic situation, but it serves to highlight the extreme difficulties involved in caring for vulnerable children and teenagers. Whilst appreciating the problems, I do not feel that this property, with a very small garden and on a shared drive, in very close proximity to other residents, is suitable to accommodate vulnerable children. Noise. I have a close friend who worked in children's care homes for 3 years. She said there was considerable noise both day and night from the children and from cars coming and going late at night and in the early morning. There will be at least 4 cars doing so in this instance every night and morning. The garden is very small and the property is very close to a number of neighbouring properties. 3 properties are extremely close. Any noise is likely to be heard by the people in these 3 houses and will cause significant disturbance and loss of amenity in a very quiet street. Health and well-being of existing residents. The assertion that this would not be affected is totally untrue. The police report says that similar children's homes in Nottinghamshire have shown increased risks of young people being exploited for county lines, drug trafficking and sexual exploitation. I refer to a similar planning application for 7 Durham Close, Mansfield Woodhouse, which was rejected. The police said that the property, and I now quote, is situated at the end of a leaky cul-de-sac with an alleyway providing access to an open space. Leaky cul-de-sacs are known crime enablers, especially for acquisitive crime and drug offences. Children from disadvantaged backgrounds are often vulnerable to either getting involved in criminality or becoming a victim of crime. I would like to suggest the applicant considers alternative locations for the children's home. End of quote. The end of Barnowl Close has a similar narrow cut through to an open space. All Barnowl Close residents, especially those with very young children, are extremely concerned about the increased possibility of such activities in our street. The residents' children will be vulnerable to such exploitation. We will not feel safe on our street. The Howard League for Penal Reform revealed that children's homes frequently call the police, sometimes over 200 times in 1 year. I don't know whether the members of the planning committee have visited the site, but considering the serious nature of our concerns, I would urge them to make a decision to visit.
Thank you, Charles. Do members have any questions of the speaker? Councillor Swinscoe.
Thank you, Chair. During your presentation, you said, you talked about that it shouldn't be, appropriate to put those children in that particular area. So, it's quite a big house, quite suitable for family living, for a large amount of children. So where do you suggest that they should live?
Well, I think it would have to be in a property in its own substantial grounds. So there's a safe boundary. In this case, there's no boundary at the front at all, because it's open to the shared drive. And at the back, there's a very small garden with low fencing, no more than 6 feet high, which could easily be climbed. They have easy access to surrounding gardens and to the streets.
So it really, it's like I say, it's a large house, a family house. So one would expect that children would be living there anyway, regardless of whether they are in care or whether.
Yes, but these are not normal children.
Excuse me, that's the wrong thing to say. Sorry.
They are vulnerable children with a difficult history, otherwise they wouldn't be in care. Why are they in care?
Sorry,
Children.
we can't have dialogue like this.
Sorry, can I
Just
ask another
questions
question,
to
please?
the, yes.
So are you aware that some children are in care because they've been abused, they're in care for no fault of their own?
Oh yes, of course, that's true.
Thank you.
Any other questions to the speaker? No indications? Thank you, Charles. The applicant had requested to speak, but unfortunately they missed the deadline and have not been allowed to present tonight. So I'll go back to the agenda. Do members have any questions of the officers? Councillor Tempest Mitchell.
Thank you. I'm reading through the paperwork and everything that I see in relation to children's homes, and this may or may not be a planning issue, recommends that the optimal level is 3 children in a children's home. And then I'm reading something from Nottinghamshire County Council from the 25th of November, which says, similarly, we understand the anxiety surrounding parking, and we believe limited availability home placements to 3 would negate this concern completely. Why are we going for 4 when everybody says 3 is the optimal number of kids?
Thank you, Councillor. So there's a number of reasons. I think firstly there's I guess the applicant. It's at the discretion of the applicant what to apply for. So I guess the planning application before the committee is for 4 children. But notwithstanding that, I think the guidance around, I'd say this committee has accepted applications for 4 children before as a principle, and those have been granted. I think as a general consideration, it would depend on the location and the size of the dwelling. In this case, we're talking a dwelling with 5 or 6 bedrooms at base. We're talking 2 integral garage spaces, which, despite the comments, could accommodate most cars, and there's at least 4 parking spaces on the front drive, and the ratio of staff to children is during the day is 1 to 1, which is considerably higher than other homes. So I think we noted the view and considered it in the planning balance overall. But I think the characteristics of the house, despite the location and the density, it's a large house with more parking than a lot of the applications that we've seen before this committee. So that would be it's no one answer, but I think we assess the application on its own merits, and we have to take a view on that.
So it's my understanding then that highways have not got any objections to the parking or where the bin store is. So, fundamentally they're saying that it's okay, basically, and it meets the planning criteria.
So that's the conclusion they came to. Yes, and we requested an amendment to the block plan to deliberately to increase the parking spaces, and the block plan shows that 4 parking spaces, and that's I say it's conservative because in reality most people would just park the car side to side. And in measuring it, I think it's reasonable to say that most arrangements would allow for 4 cars to park adjacent to each other. And I guess we've gone beyond that. And they've stated that any overspill parking would be unlikely to block the shared private driving, would be more likely to be on the street. I think that's the general assessment on that is that they have no objection subject to the conditions in the report, and we've got no reason for us to doubt that. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just clarify that? I mean, people might be getting slightly confused because originally highways did leave parking to the discretion of the local planning authority, at which point it was difficult to see really. I mean, we assessed it by having 2 garage spaces substandard and 2 in front, although the applicant did say you could possibly get 3 in there, which you possibly could if there were small cars. But when we raised the concerns, we thought it was better to suggest that the landscaped area was block paved to give more car parking space, at which point we went back to the Highway Authority and they confirmed that we were in a much better position than what we were originally. And just to confirm, I've spoken to them today, it was just for their file really, we'd spoken about it before, but their original condition was for 3 members of staff. But now with the additional car parking, they were happy with 4. That's how we've got to where we are today.
Councillor Tempest Mitchell.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry for coming back on that. So I've read your backward and forth today and the last few days with Nottinghamshire County Council. Am I right in thinking that had the county councils stuck with their original position, this probably wouldn't be here because the parking and the highways issues you weren't happy with, so we likely would not have been recommended to pass from a highways perspective. So the county council, in effect, make the decision.
I don't think I'm saying that, and if that's how it's been taken, sorry, I'm not saying that. I think we've had this discussion before about parking. Parking is discretionary to some degree. It's not like a highway safety issue where we would definitely, well, I would say 9 times out of 10 take highway advice because we're not obviously technical experts in that field. Parking, our local plan goes to the Nottinghamshire Design Guide. And the Nottinghamshire Design Guide is just that, it's guidance, it's not our formal policy. So I appreciate it's difficult because there has to be some planning judgment used with parking, I think. And I wasn't saying that it would be refused if it just showed the 2 garage spaces and 2 in front, obviously, or what the recommendation would have been. But what I'm saying is that it was a betterment if the applicant could provide additional car parking because it alleviates residents' concerns that were obviously material considerations that we looked at. And also, I think just looking at it as a planning judgment, it would be better to have more parking than just the 2 spaces and the 2 garage spaces. But obviously, if it had been just the 2 garage spaces and the 2 in front of it, we'd have had to make a planning judgment and a recommendation to you. But we haven't assessed it as that. It's with the full suite of parking.
Just like to ask you to clarify the condition on the bin storage, Dan, because you said that you were improving it by making it clear and unobstructed all the time, rather than just in collection day. But from the slides that we were showing of the parking, if you're parking cars on the new hard standing, it would obstruct the bin storage. So can you just explain how the conditions are going to work to make the bin storage issue clear?
Thank you, Chair. So just to clarify, before I talk about the wording of the condition, I think it's just important to say that the parking on that the indicative delineation shows that you've got a semicircle area for the bin store. The parking would go either side of that. It wouldn't it still would leave room for a car in principle on the far side of the boundary, plus the car parking spaces to the north of it as well. So that the parking delineation has been designed to avoid the bin store. So there would still be space for 4 cars on the driveway with the bin store unobstructed. The current wording of the condition reads as follows. It says the bin collection point as denoted on the drawing DK291 Rev E shall be kept clear from obstruction on bin collection days for the lifetime of the development. The recommendation is to amend the wording of the condition just to say that it should just be kept free of obstruction at all times. And the parking layout on that plan is designed to allow or to demonstrate, granted staffing parking will change depending on numbers of cars, whether staff car share, don't drive at all, whether they're bigger cars, smaller cars. But ultimately, the principle is that as per the highway design guide guidance, it's there to show that you can get 4 spaces on that frontage, and they would work around the bin store, not obstruct it. And that's why that condition has been recommended to be altered.
That explanation. Do members have any further questions? No? Thank you. Could I have a proposer and seconder for the recommendation, please? Councillor Hammersley, Councillor Callaghan. Now we're in debate mode. Any comments, Councillor Swinscoe?
I just really need to say that it's disappointing that the applicant couldn't have come here and to explain his reasons, particularly as there have been so many concerns from the residents. He could have done a lot to have allayed their fears, and I think in future it would be helpful if they could be invited along so that they can talk to the residents, and perhaps they could have, in the first instance, when they first put in the application, could have spoken to the residents before it came to the committee. Thank you.
So Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose my comment is based on experience of having these sorts of homes in my own ward, and residents did raise concerns about the children's behaviour and about the parking. And what's transpired is the children's behaviour has been absolutely fine, but there have been issues with staff parking inappropriately. So I would like assurance that the residents will have somewhere to go or someone to speak to who can follow up any concerns they have should the parking become a problem. Because my experience is that it did. People were spoken to and it's settled down, but we need to ensure that there is that mechanism for residents to raise concerns. Thank you.
Especially to comment. Councillor Tempest-Mitchell.
Thanks, Chair. This should be really simple for me, because kids need a nice family-orientated place to live. I've been dealing with challenging kids for 39 years. But I find this one difficult simply because of the number of 4 kids, all who may have issues or not. They might just be kids that desperately need a loving family home and a loving family community to live. But the optimal number, and the experts say the optimal number for a children's home is three kids. And that means if we vote to pass this, we'd be voting for something that's not optimal, and I'm not prepared to do that. To me, it should be 3 kids. That would also alleviate some of the issues with the parking. Some of the issues that up until today have been there, pretty much. From the picture that we see, where we see side on with the road, there's double yellow lines down the side of the house. So people are likely to be parking on those double yellow lines. I don't believe that if you have 4 staff, plus a social worker, plus a health visitor, etc., that nobody's going to park where they shouldn't park there. So for me, bringing it down to the optimal number of 3 children in a children's home is just common sense. And I hate saying this, but I'm concerned of the numbers of children and therefore staff and therefore vehicles. And I'm amazed that the county council, or the local county council, whoever that is, has allowed this to to go through the way that it has without them speaking up for the residents. Clearly the residents have issues, mainly in relation to parking. I might come back with a proposal regarding the 3 kids.
Anyone else wishing to comment? No? Just ask Claire to come back in to clarify that point.
Yeah, I think obviously the Notts County Council comments did say the optimum amount is 3 children, but I think as Dan has explained, it's each proposal on its own merits. I did do a quick look this afternoon as to ones we've granted before. There was 46 Litchfield Lane, I think that was for 4 children. We've had 2 in 24 and 1 in 25 for 4 children. I think it's each proposal on its own merits, really, in terms of whether the site can actually cope with what's proposed. And in this circumstance, it's for 4 children, 4 staff, and that meets the parking requirements of the Highway Design Guide. So I think that's where we are with it. Like I say, we have granted for 4 in the past as well. So I appreciate the concerns. I mean, there have been concerns all the way through this one. But actually, it has got quite a lot of parking on the front proposed. So.
Any further comment before we go to a vote? Councillor Hammersley.
Councillor Tipper-Mitchell mentioned the double yellow lines. Can you confirm whether they are double yellow lines or not?
Well, they are. I know it looks like it on there, but I think it's the way the photo is. I think it's the curb and then there's a line there. But Lucy, do you know?
No, but they're not. It's not. Yeah.
No.
Thank you. I
just know the Highway Authority said to me that if somebody was going to come and there wasn't any spaces, they'd park on that little bit of land there. That's what they said. So I just assumed that they weren't double lines. And I think if you got Google Maps up, they're not. Okay. I mean, it is tight around here. It's one of those estates that was built under a reduced car parking standards. I think if anyone remembers, it's sort of the old PPS 3 for people that have been in it a long time. But yeah, I mean, I do appreciate parking is tight, and you can see it because they're on the road. But at the end of the day, this does meet its parking need or parking requirement.
Built on Greenfield, ancient, you know. Councillor Cockstead.
Yeah, you indicated that obviously we've had several applications that's gone through with 4 children based at these places, and I was just talking to my colleague here in way of complaints of any sort, of any nature from these places over time, and we're not aware of anything that would have been sort of raised within them applications when they were agreed, and they've gone on to be successful places. Residential side, you know, where do you put these? Where do you put these places for these children to be able to be living in normalised areas? You know, to me, it's you know, Walsall, along with Mansfield, you know, we're a lovely place to be. People want to be here, and with that in mind, and the knowledge that I have with looked after children, I will be supporting this.
To come back on, if I may, Chair, I think that the difficulty with these sorts of applications is the management of them, and there's only really so far planning can actually go. And certainly I've got an appeal decision here which talks about it's the responsibility of the Ofsted regime which provides the appropriate regulation to consider the appropriate use of the property. So I think that's another factor as well, that planning can only go so far in terms of land use, and it's actually the management of these properties that is key in the delivery. And like I say, that is really difficult for planning to enforce against. We just simply couldn't do it because there's other bodies out there that actually do that.
Swinscoe.
It's just some clarification, Claire. You just mentioned about Ofsted. So if the residents did have any concerns about the management, that is an option for them to go through once if it does get passed. It's not planning consideration.
I think so. I don't think it will. Well, it wouldn't be planning because obviously we can only control the conditions that we put on the planning application, and that will be sort of in relation to car parking, that the car parking has to be provided before the use commences, that the car parking will be left open for car parking for all times. So yeah, I think it probably would be Ofsted, but I don't know if I can't tell you categorically. That's who you'd have to go to. I'm not entirely sure.
Tramline didn't have businesses.
I would have thought so, but like I say, I think
it would also come back to Notts County Council because they're the lead authority for children and young people, and so they will monitor that as well. And if there's any issues, should it get past planning tonight, that is the residents' port of call to go to Notts County Council because they are the lead agency for children and young people.
Comment indicated. Okay. Well, the motion's been moved and seconded. Can we have a vote on the motion to accept by show of hands, please? All those in favour? Any abstentions? Any against? The motion's been carried, 7 in favour, 1 abstention. Thank you. So application change of use from residential dwelling use class C3 to a children's home for a maximum of 4 children use class C2, 16 Barnwell Close, Church Warsop, Nottinghamshire, has been granted planning permission with conditions. Condition on the bin storage. I'll move on to agenda item 5, which is planning appeals decisions. Can you note that there were none received during this period? Show of hands, please. Thank you. Agenda item 6, which is the tree preservation order for 0166 Broadlands, 30 High Oakham Hill, Mansfield. Could I invite the officer to make a report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The provisional tree preservation order includes 13 number of trees to the north and along the eastern boundary of Broadlands, number 30 High Oakham Hill. The provisional tree preservation order was served following the submission of a full planning application, which, amongst other things, includes the removal of the trees along the eastern boundary of Broadlands. The council's tree officer has assessed the site and considered that these trees merit the protection of a tree preservation order. The trees add amenity value to the street scene. A number of objections have been received, raising concerns to the safety, root structure, and limited lifespan of the trees, blocked sunlight, clogged gutters, debris from fallen leaves, minimal visibility of the trees from public areas, and the lack of screening by the trees to or from the property. The tree officer considers that tree works may be permitted through application process where they are supported by an appropriate arboricultural assessment and management. Any effect that causes a deterioration to the physiology of the trees would be taken into consideration should applications be submitted. The tree officer also confirms that the trees are publicly visible, although they have a limited lifespan. They hold value in terms of visual amenity, landscape cohesion, and in general ecological terms. The trees do not have to provide a screening to be suitable for protection, and proximity to the property is not a significant factor in determining the suitability of a tree preservation order. In addition, the Council has carried out a tree evaluation method for preservation orders, which is also called a tempo assessment of the trees on site prior to the placement of the provisional tree preservation order, and the trees received a score in the tempo that merit the protection of tree preservation order. Therefore, for the reasons outlined in the report in my presentation, it is recommended that members confirm the tree preservation order. On the slides are just some photos that shows the trees and its location. Yes, you can see that most of the trees are along the eastern boundary of Broadlands, and there's 2 trees up to the north.
Questions, officer? No? Thank you. We have a proposer, Councillor Coxhead, Councillor Calhoun. Anyone wish to comment? We have a vote or show of hands on, please, to accept these. Any abstentions? Any against? No, that's unanimous. Thank you. So the tree preservation orders are approved. Leaves us with agenda item 7, Agencies for Human Rights and Use Classes. Could I have a show of hands to say we've read and noted those? It's unanimous, thank you very much. And that concludes business for tonight. So I'd like to thank you for your attendance. Wish you all Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and safe journey home. Thank you.